Anne, thank you so much for coming. We're very, very glad to have you here.
I have 3 issues here. I'm going to start with, we're going to do them in numerical order, so we have to start with redistricting. That's also the issue that is probably the most near and dear to my heart. I have been working on it for, do you want me to use the mic?
Yeah, Mike.
Just move your that staticky sound.
I can't eliminate that.
Can't get rid of it. Okay, we're starting with the redistricting, which is going to be issue number 1. I personally think that all 3 of these have some impact, will have some impact on changing our state if they're passed. I really, really believe it's number 1 that's going to have the most impact on changing the way we in Ohio live. I think it can give us a much more a legislature that is going to be much more responsive to voters and is going to be really much more reflective of the attitudes of voters. I think over the years, gerrymandering in Ohio and Illinois and a lot of different states has really pulled the legislature over to a different place than where the voters are. And I think this really has a good potential of putting that back in a little bit more balance. And so we feel like, yeah, they're doing the right thing down there in Columbus, because I'm not sure many of us think, Democrats or Republican, thinks, yeah, they're really doing some good stuff down there in Columbus. So if we can get a little bit more bipartisanship going on down there, I think we're all going to benefit from it quite a bit. So redistricting, just real quickly, we started redistricting and gerrymandering when they first started the country. It's been going on since at least 1803 was the first known gerrymander. So we've been manipulating districts for a long time, and we're getting really good at it. That's the salamander. That's the way the districts look. That's the first gerrymandered district. It was in Massachusetts. This shows kind of how bad the gerrymanders are. You can look at the one to the left, and that's Cincinnati. And the district snakes along the river, snakes along. There's no reason that little skinny thing belongs out there. That piece of District 29 should be in District 30. I mean, any logical, any 6-year-old could figure that out. The legislature couldn't. What do map makers do? If we lived, it would be impossible to gerrymander if how we lived was Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. That's not how we live, however. Actually, in Ohio, independent or non-affiliated really is the largest group in Ohio. However, when we get to the ballot box, we basically have 2 choices, and we can't kind of go down the independent path. So if you're looking at that kind of a definition of party, then pretty much of us have a party ID, because that's about all we have the choice of. So if we lived in that kind of very random kind of even way, you couldn't manipulate our vote. But if we lived together with Democrats kind of all together here and Republicans kind of all together here, we can manipulate the vote, because you can take all of those, say, Republicans, and you can keep them together and make a nice, strong Republican district. Or you could bust them up and add them to 60% and make a district 60% Democrat and dilute all those votes. Same thing over here. So you can manipulate the votes in order to have a very partisan outcome. You can have a sweetheart deal where there's safe districts for you and safe districts for me. You can pack them, and you can get 3. We have blues and pinks here. You can take the same people and make them into 3 blue districts and 1 pink, or you can make them into 3 pink districts and 1 blue. That's how much you can manipulate the outcomes by the way you draw the lines. So we have very predictable results. If you look at this is our Ohio Senate. The projected column is the first one with the percentages. You can see there really aren't 50-50 districts. There aren't districts that have about 50% Republicans and 50% Democrats. That would be too easy. Those would be competitive. Voters would have a choice. Apparently the people who drew the lines didn't believe in that. As you can see, pretty much the districts are going to go either Democrat or they're going to go Republican. It's very predictable, and that, I think, is where we've lost a lot of our power as voters. There's the rest of the Senate. In 2000, we elect half of them every 2 years. The Democrats and the Republicans, nobody likes how we're doing it now. Everybody agrees there's a problem. For a long time, there was a lot of disagreement about what the solution was going to be. And that's kind of what miraculously happened last December, was there finally was a solution that both the Democrats and the Republicans could live with. There's also a little window of time. Once you get to know kind of how the next elections are going to come out and who's going to be holding the pencil and in charge of the redistricting, then whoever that party is uninterested in redistricting reform. So right now, nobody's quite sure who's going to be in charge in 2021, which is the next time we're going to do redistricting. So right now, we can probably make some reforms. 2-3 years from now, that window is shut, because it's starting to become pretty clear who's going to hold the power in 2021 and who's going to be able to manipulate those districts in their favor. So it's a good bipartisan issue. The league held some competitions that were at the same time as the map drawers were doing their maps in 2011, and we found that you could make the districts compact. You could keep subdivisions together, cities could be together, counties could stay together. You didn't bust up counties and cities. You could have competitive districts, and you could have about 50-50 Democrat and Republican districts, because that's what Ohio is. As we know, during the presidential years, we are a battleground state because we're about a 50-50 state. So our districts should kind of look that way. And you can make you can have all of these things in a map if you want them. This is issue 1. It was a House Joint HJR, which is a House Joint Resolution passed through the House. And this basically is what it's doing. It's establishing a bipartisan commission. There's a lot of strict rules about not breaking up, first of all, counties, secondly, cities, third, townships. If you can keep them together, you must keep them together. Right now, you can kind of manipulate those. There's a specific requirement that says a plan cannot favor one party or the other. And that is going to be huge. That's going to be a real big change for Ohio. Requires that map making be transparent. They're going to have to show their maps to the public and hold hearings before they adopt them. That's going to be really big. Last time in 2011, the maps for the General Assembly came out about 4 o'clock on Friday, and the hearing to adopt them was at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. They didn't do it because they had some problems, not with voters, but they had some problems with a couple of elected officials who didn't like the way the maps were. So they stopped. They took the elected officials' problems into consideration, changed the maps, didn't care about the public, and voted out the new maps. This is going to be different. They don't have to necessarily change the maps, but we can have media and a lot of voters all over them for that period of time before they adopt the maps and after they have to show them to us. There is the plans. Plans are done every 10 years after we have the census. We have to have equal number of people in each district. That's why we do them every 10 years. And so we've always had for the most part, unless the courts are involved, we've had 10-year plans. And that's what we're looking for again. And if you have 2 members of the minority party and at least 2 members of the majority party, if you have at least a bipartisan agreement of 2 people from each party, then there will be a 10-year map. Legislators like 10-year maps. They don't like districts that are going to change in another 4 years. So that's a big carrot to get a 10-year map. If, by some reason, they are totally at gridlock, there is kind of an escape clause, and that would put in a temporary map for 4 years. But another reason whoever's trying to draw the lines doesn't want a temporary map is in that 4-year period, we're going to have another set of statewide elections. And 3 of the people on the apportionment board, or the new redistricting board, are the governor, the secretary of state, and the state auditor. Those people can change. They can have a different party. So you may think that you're doing, your party's in charge kind of right now, and you can get a short-term plan, but the other party may very well be in charge in 4 years. So maybe you don't, maybe you want to go for that 10-year plan. We worked a lot with Dr. Gunther, and even though competitiveness is not specifically mentioned, because the rules are so strict and essentially make it so you can't do nearly as much gerrymandering, we're probably going to we should end up with a lot more competitive districts than what we have right now. Congressional reform, we have to say almost former Speaker of the U.S. House, John Boehner, but that has been one of the problems in getting redistricting for the congressional level done in Ohio. That is not what we're voting on this fall. It's only for the General Assembly, only for the Ohio House and the Ohio Senate. The league is for this reform. We've been working on it since the 1970s. And the reason I think we're optimistic this time is that there is such broad support. We have the ACLU, we have the Chamber of Commerce. These people are generally not on the same side of any given issue. We have the Ohio Democratic Party, we have the Ohio Republican Party. Both parties are supporting this. So this is kind of one of those magical moments where we have a very divisive issue that I think nobody likes 100% of this, but both parties and voters, I think, like enough of it that we really need to make this step forward. So it's a pretty amazing, and this was actually about a month ago, so there's even some more people since then. But it's been a pretty amazing coalition. And I think every newspaper that's had an editorial on it, NetBoard choice about this has said vote yes on issue 1.
Why are Republicans supporting this? What about it?
The question is, why are the Republicans supporting this?
Yeah.
Let me come back to you just, and I'll let me give it. Why do you think that? Why do you think they shouldn't?
Because they're not
Because they're a
often.
majority party right now. I mean, why would they want anything?
Because
My
okay.
smarter half will speak now.
Okay. No, and I think that's an excellent question, and it kind of comes from different places sometimes. That's why I was curious. Who gets to draw the lines right now? It's done by the Ohio Apportionment Board. The governor, the Secretary of State, the auditor, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. As long, whichever party thinks it can win 2 out of 3 of the governor, the auditor, and the Secretary of State is opposed to redistricting because they have the power. Nobody knows who's going to win in 2021. The Republicans have drawn the districts 3 times, the Democrats have drawn the districts 2 times. This can go both ways. I think the Republicans, A, are turned into statesmen, B, they're worried about what would happen, having done to them what they have been doing to others. It is to some extent taking a chance not to do something where you are sure that not only that you are going to have a say. I mean, you have to give a say to the other party too, but you will now have a say. Both parties will have a say. And I think they're going to be much, it's hedging their bets. That's my best guess. And I think one reason why the whole legislature moved is that the initiative, as we've seen this year again, is being used more and more, and they are afraid that somebody's going to come along with some crazy redistricting reform that neither party likes, like, for example, what we did in 2012, and that they're going to have to work to defeat it again, and they weren't real happy with 2012. neither party, and it can be something that neither party likes. So I think there's any number of reasons that kind of push toward that tipping point.
Really kind of like two questions. One is, who is actually the board that makes it up now? Can you redefine that? I was kind of unclear on that. And the other one is, you talked about competitiveness and compactness as the criteria. What is the overriding criteria? Townships, counties, or just the shape of the district? So two
Okay.
questions on that. I'm sorry to make two.
First of all, who does it right now?
No, who will do it? If issue
Who will do
2,
it?
1 passes.
Who will do it?
Yes.
In kind of a nod toward not too much change in what we're doing right now, it is those 5 people still, plus an additional Democrat and an additional Republican.
So it's a
So-
wider.
So there's 7 instead of 5,
Okay.
but you still have the 3 appointed officials. And so since you have the Democrat, Republican that are appointed, it is still, the political composition still depends on the political parties of the governor, the Secretary of State, and the auditor. So had this been, had we done redistricting 2 years before we did it right now, we would have had the Strickland administration, and we would have had kind of a Democratic sweep in that election. The election that had the power to do the redistricting, there was a Republican sweep. So that can go back and forth. So that this is who would do it in the future. Right now, the Ohio Constitution right now talks about counties as the building blocks, and then the cities, and then the townships. But it also talks, but there's any number of rules in what we're doing right now. That's one of them, is you keep those together. Another one is that you don't change the maps from the last go-around any more than you have to. Now that is kind of a problem if you've kind of switched parties in the meantime. It kind of hamstrings whichever new party took over. For example, right now it would hamstring the Democrats because they would have to kind of keep the districts the same. And then there's other basic rules like equal population. You have to comply with the Voting Rights Act so that majority districts are recognized. There are any number of criteria. And it went up to the court after the last redistricting. And the court just said, you have so many competing rules here. I'm not going to get real upset if you haven't followed the county, don't split up your county rule too perfectly, because you were trying to follow 5 or 6 different rules. That was a problem. So one of the things this is going to do is make it very clear which rule. First you have to follow this rule, then if you still have room to manipulate and room to draw lines in different choices, then you need to follow this rule, then you need to follow this rule, then you need to follow this rule. So there's kind of a hierarchy of rules this time. Some of them are the same, some of them are totally gone. A new one is that no party can be favored disproportionate to its strength with the electorate. So you go back 10 years and you look and you go, well, Ohio's about a 50-50 state. Therefore, if these districts are drawn like the congressional are right now, 75-25, that's wrong. That plan, our congressional plan, if it had to follow these rules, would be thrown out. So there's some old rules kind of with the counties and some new rules. Answer your, did I get there? Okay.
Mostly, okay.
Mostly? Yes, sir, in the back.
I'm going to make a comment here. Political process is a show of power. We forget about the politics of its very nature is you're opposing your will, whether you're Democrat, Republican, whatever, opposing your will on your opposition. And it is a disadvantage to the activists of either party, whether they be Democrat or Republican, to get rid of gerrymandering. The Republicans have it now. The Democrats could have easily done it if they had had the better activists in place to make sure that their people were in power. In states like Massachusetts
Okay,
and Maryland.
that's your 30 seconds, if you can finish your thought.
Yeah, in states like Maryland and Massachusetts, the answer is Matt's answer, and the Democrats are doing it as well. So we have to remember this isn't just a Republican apparatus is being used.
Okay, I apologize if I have in any way indicated that it's a Republican apparatus. It is an apparatus equally available to both parties, which the Republicans have had the good fortune to be dealing with in the last 2 redistrictings, and the Democrats had the good fortune to deal with it before. And we don't know who's going to be dealing with it the next time. And Illinois is another one. There's a lot of lawsuits always coming out of Illinois because of the Democratic gerrymanders there. We have the lawsuits coming out of Ohio because of the Republican gerrymanders here. I think everybody needs to clean up their act.
Other questions? Yes, in the back.
Yes, this basic assumption seems like that there will always just be Democrats and Republicans. Is this a good thing to be putting into law, or does this not allow for additional parties? How does this get addressed?
Okay. Actually, when I'm kind of using shorthand, the question is, this really doesn't take into consideration third parties. And that is true. And that is very consistent with all of Ohio's election law. We very much look at the majority, the top, the most numerous party and the second most numerous party is kind of how all of our statutes are written. And this goes in that direction also. Now, it doesn't always have to be the Democrats and the Republicans. There may be another political party that overtakes one of those and becomes either the first or second most, getting the first or second most votes. But you are right. It does not give a lot of power to a third party or a fourth party or a fifth party. It is number one and number two. But that's, and I share your concern, and I kind of looked at that, but that is just so how we are currently operating, that I think it made some sense, and I couldn't figure out a better way of doing it than using you need to have a minority, the second largest party sign off, and only use those two. Once you get 3 and 4 in there, I think it becomes really, really complicated. There are still going to be some very extreme districts in Ohio. I grew up in Auglaize County, which is very rural Ohio. It's a very Republican area. They are not going to be represented in their own minds fairly unless it's somebody who is a pretty staunch Republican. And and now I live in Columbus. There are areas in Columbus who would feel very unrepresented if they weren't represented by a pretty strong, liberal-minded Democrat. And so we're still going to have those areas because of how we live. We don't live every other down the street. We kind of live with our own kind, whatever that may be. And so there are areas like that. But there should be more areas where we have kind of that sometimes it's Republican, sometimes it's a Democratic district. And I think those are going to be very powerful in holding sway in the General Assembly.
I was just curious if you're aware of any effort to address the congressional district dilemma now that Congressman Boehner is relinquishing power, as it were, and wouldn't be in the way. Do you know if this coalition, that looks like a pretty extensive coalition, is going to address the congressional districts, or will this take the wind out of that?
The Constitutional Modernization Commission, which is looking at the Ohio Constitution, is looking at the congressional issue. In fact, they're looking at it on Thursday. I'll be down there. So there is some, at least discussion of it. It had been held up pending the case out of the U.S. Supreme Court case out of Arizona. In the Arizona case, there was an independent, kind of quasi-independent commission in Arizona, and the question was, since the U.S. Constitution says that state legislatures will pick their, will make the congressional districts, then how can you move this over to an independent commission? The court said how they did it was fine, and how we are doing it is actually even less problematic than what Arizona was doing. So we got over that hump, and so now they are starting to look at it again. Interestingly, on issue 1 on the General Assembly, the Ohio Constitution Modernization Commission was looking at that issue also. but they never finished their process because it went over to the Ohio House and it got done there. So I don't know what the tipping point was that kind of pushed that over where we got Representative Huffman and Representative Sykes to do this. They were both term limited out. I think they wanted to do something good before they left. They kind of saw a nice opening where they could both work together, and it worked. I am hoping kind of the sun and the moon and the stars line up again, and we can do the same thing on congressional. I think congressional is more difficult even than the House, than the General Assembly. So, hope springs eternal. If we don't do it pretty soon, I don't think it will get done for 2021. We may have to look for 2031.
Thank you.
Okay, issue 2 and issue 3. Just let me just do a little background on issue 2 and issue 3. Issue 3 is an initiative put on the ballot by voters, not by the legislature, and it would authorize marijuana, both recreational and medicinal, in Ohio, and it would provide for 10 different distribution pipelines, 10 different sites that could grow it, along with a small amount that individuals could grow. But there would be essentially these 10 sites. And the legislature looked at that as being a monopoly. And they saw what happened a number of years ago when the casinos, after having been on the ballot for 3 times, finally passed the 4th time, giving 4 owners of 4 specific pieces of land in the state of Ohio the sole right to operate a casino. And, you know, I think that was a big wake-up call for the legislature. They had kind of sat that one out, they really didn't do much, and then it passed. And they saw the marijuana initiative coming along with some of those same kinds of issues, as far as putting they put the parcel numbers, they don't put addresses, they put parcel numbers in the Ohio Constitution of the 10 locations that would be permitted to grow the marijuana. And they saw, and those are all privately owned. And they saw that and they went, okay, we've seen this before. We don't like this idea of people coming in, financing a campaign, and their payoff being that they own one of the 4 casino sites or one of the 10 sites that is permitted to grow marijuana. So, in response to that initiative, which is now number 3, I come back to what the legislature did, which is issue number 2, which is essentially saying that, and I have a copy of the joint resolution, which is what I was attempting to put up there and apparently hit the wrong key somewhere. So everything you've read is a summary in some way of the joint resolution, because if we say yes on issue 2, then this is what will go in the Constitution. The joint resolution will go in, not ballot language, not some sort of summary. This is what goes in. And it says, restraint of trade or commerce being injurious to this state and its citizens, the power of the initiative shall not be used to pass an amendment to this Constitution that would grant or create a monopoly, oligopoly, or cartel, specifically or to determine a tax rate, or confer a commercial interest, commercial right, or commercial license to any person, non-public entity, or group of persons. So they are saying, essentially, that any initiative that grants a monopoly, determines a tax rate, or grants a commercial license to an individual, that does it in a way that everybody else can't do it, which is essentially is kind of like a monopoly. Only these people can do it, nobody else can. It will be illegal. You can't do it. Okay, well, that pretty much would wipe out issue 3 if they didn't go on any farther than that, or it would wipe out things like issue 3 if they didn't go on farther. And that is my next slide, which I think I actually have. Okay. What they would do, okay, first of all, you would have all of the initiatives go to the ballot board. The first thing the ballot board does with it is decide whether it's more than one issue. Sometimes they will break them up into 2 or 3, 4 or 4 issues instead of being one big issue, if they deem them to be somewhat unrelated. So this will, the way the constitutional amendment goes is that the initiative petition will go to the ballot board. The ballot board will say, we need to put 2 questions on the ballot, not just one. If they indeed find it to be a monopoly or to grant a tax that is different than everybody else's taxes, or to grant a commercial interest that's not available to everybody else on an equal footing. We would need to put 2 questions on the ballot. The first question is, shall we override our previous policy of not wanting a monopoly, not wanting special taxes, and not wanting special commercial licenses that aren't available to anybody else? And that's kind of in green up there, that's the A. The first question will be as follows. And then the second question will be the initiative. It'll be the substantive question of what somebody wanted to put on the ballot. In this case, it would be the marijuana, should we legalize marijuana with all the things that are in the initiative? That would be question number 2. But question number 1 would be, do we want to really overrule our prior statement that we don't like monopolies? Now, if in the future, if we would pass this, and then the marijuana issue as it is today would be on the ballot 3 years from now, 2 years from now, we would be faced with 2 questions. 1, do you want to override what we said about not liking monopolies or special taxes or special commercial interests? That would be question number 1. Voters can say, yes, we want to override. And then they could also come to question number 2 is, do you want this initiative, yes or no? And we would say, yes, we want that initiative. So you get to the same place where we are right now. It's a 2-step process instead of a 1-step process. And that's the difference. So I think what the legislature is saying is, we're going to give you the right to put on any initiative you want. We're not taking away that. But we're going to make you think about it a little bit longer. And so anybody who says it's going to make it harder is probably right. I think it will make it harder. Because we're going to have to think through 2 steps. We have to get a yes on, do we want to essentially override our general policy of being against monopolies? And so the voters are going to have to, 50% plus 1 vote is going to have to say, yes, we want to override our anti-monopoly provision of our Constitution. And then they're going to have to say, and yes, we want to make a monopoly out of whatever. The League's position on this one is that we are for a yes vote on this one. It does not take away the rights of citizens to initiative, because you can do it with a 2-step process, not just instead of a 1-step process. It's still there, and you're keeping a lot of things out of the Ohio Constitution that really shouldn't be there. The Ohio Constitution should be a general document of guiding principles, not something that lays out the addresses of where the casinos are going to be, or all the specific ways it's going to be regulated, this and this, instead of statutes. Essentially, I mean, the summary of the marijuana petition is 4 pages of print this size. That's the summary. So we're putting in the Constitution things that really belong in statute. And that's been the same thing with the casinos, and the League is opposed to putting that level of detail and regulatory structure into the Constitution.
And if the citizen initiative petition for the ballot does not involve a financial interest, does it have to go through 2 steps like you just described?
Okay.
It sounds like when you're saying it has to it goes through two steps only if there's a financial involvement with it.
It goes through two steps only if it would grant or create a monopoly, oligopoly, or cartel. It would specify or determine a tax rate that is not available to other people, and it would confer a commercial interest, commercial right, or commercial license that is not available to other
So
people.
therefore, a one-step thing if it doesn't have any money involved.
If it doesn't have any of these involved, and these are all really private interests that are involved. So if it's all public interest, if it, then it's a one-step process, because it's not creating any of these three things that are kind of in the, and it starts out saying restraint of trade or commerce being injurious to the state. So if it doesn't have one of those kind of restraint of trade ideas in it, then it would just be the one-step process. It would just go on the ballot just the way we do it right now. But if you are not creating a monopoly, doing a differential tax rate that's not, I mean, things are taxed differently. Alcohol is taxed differently than milk, which is taxed differently than clothing. And so we do tax things differently, but all clothing is taxed alike and all milk is taxed alike. So within those categories, they need to be taxed alike.
The citizens' initiative could not, or would have this extra hurdle to do such differential taxation.
You know, I'm sorry, but I'm not well versed enough in this to be able to give you a good answer. Power of the ballot board, and I think those are the three people that you're referring to. There's actually 5 people on the ballot board, but I'm assuming you're referring to the ballot board.
Majority of the ballot board.
3 people on the ballot board out of the 5. Okay. The ballot board, I will agree with you. I think the ballot board has become somewhat politicized. They definitely have their opinions on some initiatives, and I think we may well want to look at the ballot board again. They routinely are taken up to the Ohio Supreme Court, and a lot of their decisions are being changed by the Ohio Supreme Court. You do need to remember that the people on the ballot board, 3 of them are people that we have elected. They are elected officials. They aren't appointed. They then appoint 2 more, but there are elected officials on the ballot board, and we vote for all 7 of the Supreme Court members. And so those are all not appointed, they are elected. So we are asking our elected officials to do some things. The Ohio Supreme Court has routinely overruled a lot of what the ballot board has done. Not everything, but they have overruled some of it. So I would not say that the Supreme Court is not doing, is not looking at taking this job seriously as far as the ballot board is concerned. I think the problem lies with the ballot board, and we may need to rethink how that is done and who composes it. If both 2 and 3 have yes votes, I think there's a virtual 100% certainty that that's going to go to the court. Now, what I have read, and I've not read extensively on this, is that there's a difference in the effective date of when they, the dates of when they're effective. And 2 would be effective right away because it was put on by the legislature. Right. So 2 beats out 3 in that scenario.
Yeah, and that's sort of like, that's like wishing that a candle would go out,
And I'm not, I don't.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
I think we're, that's just going to. I think the most sensible answer is the Supreme Court's going to have to sort it all out.
This issue 3, I've worked on this issue for over 30 years, and this is, I'll be honest with you, I am soured on myself to have to say I have to vote against issue 3. I have to vote no on it. And I wouldn't think
You said twice, you mentioned the phrase injurious to interstate commerce, and that bothers me because it's a separate issue from taxation itself. So in your saying injurious to interstate commerce, I mean, that just opened, you didn't say that?
Restraint,
Well, you
Okay.
didn't say that as a part of the 4 items, that's right, but you've mentioned this twice, and so it concerns me in terms of bringing an initiative to the ballot, because this could be, any initiative can be construed to be injurious to interstate commerce, so I just would like you to.
this is the language I think you're referring to. And it's almost like a whereas. Whereas, restraint of trade or commerce being injurious to the state and its citizens, the power of the initiative shall not be used to pass an amendment to this Constitution that would grant or create a monopoly, determine a tax rate, or confer a commercial interest. Now, the specific things that it has to do is not, it has to do one of those specific things, not just generally restrain trade.
You're sure about that?
Until you get an opinion from the Ohio Supreme Court, you are never 100% sure. But that would be a normal way of reading that.
I wanted to ask about the ballot board. When is it named? Do we have a ballot board that would be continuing after November's election? And you mentioned something about the people on it. Will you clarify by telling us, if you know, the 5 people who are currently on the ballot board?
The Secretary of State is the chairperson of the ballot board, and he does, and he convenes it, he does all the stuff. It's a 5-person board. I know that there is at least 1 Democrat on it, and I think right now there are either 3 or 4 Republicans. I can't remember exactly who that 3rd seat, the 4th seat is. But there's a Democratic appointee, there's a Republican appointee, and those 2 currently are private citizens. And then there are 2 appointees out of the House and Senate, and there's a Secretary of State.
I believe you mentioned that one of the members of the ballot board, a Democratic member, is the former state senator,
Sure.
Nina Turner
Correct.
of Cleveland.
Correct. So she would be the non-elected, non-office holder on the Democratic side,
Right.
and then there's a non-office holder on the Republican side.
There are 2 Democrats on it right now.
There's 2 Democrats on it right now. Okay. So there's likely, I'm not totally sure, but likely, and there's, they are out of the legislature. So there's Secretary of State, a Democrat and Republican out of the legislature, and then a private Democrat and a private Republican. Something along those lines. But it's going to be bipartisan. There's 5 people. It has to be bipartisan. The Secretary of State is the chair of that committee. And that's kind of the swing vote. So you look at the party of the Secretary of State, and you can kind of draw some conclusions from there about how things are going to go.
That's Mr. Husted?
That's Mr. Houston, yes.
Okay.
Issue 3, this is the league summary. If you want to, you can go to on the Secretary of State's website is a section called Ballot Board. And you can run down that and you can find the full-length version of the initiative petition. You can also find it on the Attorney General's website because they have to approve the language and the summary. And so it's on 2 different websites, either the Attorney General's or the Secretary of State's under the Ballot Board section. So it is quite long. The summary alone is, I just have the summary here. That's 4 sheets of fine print. So this is even a distillation well beyond that. It is going to legalize marijuana for personal and medical use and establish rules for growth and sales. There are 10 sites, and the parcel numbers are in the Ohio, or it will be in the Constitution if this is passed, just like the sites for the casinos that are in the Constitution. You know, in Columbus, we wanted to move it from one place to another. No, we have to vote. We have to vote on that. The entire state needs to vote on whether we can move it because that site was in there, and this will be the same way. Those 10 sites are, and they already are owned or under contract or whatever, and so the 10 people who will own these are determined. In fact, I've seen a lot of the names in the paper, although I don't really remember them. There's quality control. There will be 1,100 retail outlets, but they can only get it from the 10 specified sites and cannot develop their own supplies. So individuals can have up to, they can possess up to 8 ounces at one time, and they can have, I thought it was 1 ounce. I don't know. Okay. They can have a limited amount at any given time, and they can grow, and you can get 4 plants that you get from these sites, and you can grow your own. Grow their own?
Yeah.
Okay. Selling marijuana outside sanctioned outlets would be a felony, so I guess you cannot buy it and then sell it to your neighbor. That's the bare outlines of what it would do. And I have my summary here, so I'm ready for more questions.
Okay, all right, questions? Yes, sir.
What is the League of Women Voters of Ohio's position on issue 3?
And I must overrule my fellow league members over here. We are neutral. We don't have a position in the sense of yes or no. We are neutral on that, basically because we don't have a position on marijuana, period, so we have nothing to refer back to. We oppose it not because of any issue about marijuana. We have not looked at that. There are a lot of pros and cons. Medical marijuana, a lot of pros and cons. But we are saying no on 3 because of yeah, I knew that.
Because of the use of
I knew that. Well, because of the specificity of everything that is in there. We don't really, and you know, it's really kind of sad that there are any number of things that we've done really long, detailed sections on in the Ohio Constitution that just really junk it up, essentially.
But how did they determine the 10?
How did they determine the 10? That was done by, when you put together an initiative, people just sit down in a room and start drawing it out. And, you know, the people who came up with the initiative said, and then these are all big investors. And so this is essentially, the bottom line is, we need money to get this passed, and these 10 people will give us money, and therefore, I'm not sure I personally have proof of that, but I mean, I think that's certainly some very reasonable conclusion to be drawn. That certainly was how the casinos were done.
Okay.
Well, you have to understand, this came out of one investment company out of Cincinnati, and they created these numbered corporations, 1 through 10, that come out, Top Boss 1, Top Boss 2, Top Boss 3, some weird sense of humor. And so these are created from one cloth. And there's no way that we can see who the real owners of this are. They've put up 10 people as figureheads for the ownership of this thing. But please look at it, and the Cincinnati Enquirer has come out the same way as me, that you cannot see who the secret investors in this thing is.
Okay.
And this is out-of-state money coming in here, and they're not disclosing that to us.
What is disclosed in the initiative is the parcel number. So essentially, you can get the address of the lots and how big they are. So you know exactly where they are. You can see who owns it, but it may be held in a corporate name, and you're not quite sure who's behind that corporation. So, some of the people, I believe, are known because I believe that my local newspaper has at least speculated on who these folks are. I know more of having read it and what it's going to do as opposed to where it came from. And I don't know that that can be tracked very well. I can track through the legislature and how that came about, how issue 2 came about. I can track that. I can't really track issue 3 very well. I think issue 2 says you still get to vote for everything you could vote on before, and you get to vote on an additional thing, which is, do you want to overrule this monopoly, this part of the Constitution? It doesn't take anything. If the voters want something, they can still have it. They're just going to have to vote twice for it. It weakens the power of initiative when it comes to giving out private franchises. Yeah.
Okay, a question from the back.
I think it's today's messenger. On the editorial page, there's an editorial from one of the newspapers in Ohio, and they were very interested. There are few words that are used in monopoly and cap. This is a united, this is the Citizens United telling full force. Is really what it's about. If you understand that, well, that is where the money is coming from. Nobody will ever know who gives that money.
Okay, 30 seconds.
They are doing all those ads on TV now, which are, and they really go into this in the editorial. So in the editorial, we must do.
The Messenger's the local paper. Pick one up before you leave town.
It's
Let's,
not a local, editorial.
Okay.
They have a page where they use.
okay, I just, Ann might not know the name of the newspaper, so I thought I better apprise her. Yes, we have a question over here.
Hi, I'm speaking as a person who's worked in the field of drug abuse for 36 years, and although the monopoly issue is very salient here, I'm also very concerned about an amendment which would legalize marijuana. It is, like alcohol, in some respects, a mild intoxicant that is enjoyed by many people without problems. But there are also people who have develop serious problems, and that's particularly true of teenagers.
Okay.
And I'm very concerned that the cost,
30 seconds.
human cost and monetary cost is associated with those problems well outweigh any benefit that would come from this or another
All right,
action to
All right.
legalize marijuana.
more than 30 seconds. Okay, did you have a response to that?
No,
Okay.
no, the league has not looked at that, so we are not weighing in on that piece of it.
Kevin?
Yeah, I'm a little bit disturbed that. All right, I'll-
And if you go to point number 23 in the summary, it says, requiring in the 4th year following adoption of the amendment, the commission is supposed to develop an annual consumer demand metrics for medical marijuana and marijuana, which may be used by the commission in conjunction with other findings to issue a license for an additional MGCE, which is the growing facility.
Yeah, one in the 5th year.
One more. And additional.
Anyone in the audience want to make further comment on that issue? Yes, sir.
I guess I just wanted to make sure everyone, especially the press, understands that nowhere in this amendment does it speak to industrial uses for hemp. Hemp is a premier source of food, fiber, fuel, and food, and medicine. And it does not allow Ohio farmers to grow commercial hemp for any of those purposes either. So.
And that's insane in Ohio.
Okay.
I think I know the answer to this, but I just want confirmation because I haven't heard it. Issue 2, that would grandfather in the casino situation,
David,
right?
do you read?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
It
so
only
casinos
becomes
are just gonna
effective
be-
on November the 3rd or whenever election day is, if it passes.
Okay. A couple other points that I just wanted to hit on. One of them is people ask for investors. And there are, if you go to Ballotopedia, you can see investors listed by them. There's about 18 people maybe, recognizable people like the boy band guy from Cincinnati, Nick Lachey, or whatever. Lachey, okay.
My timekeeper and I were
Frosty
confused.
Rucker.
Is this like a second question or is this still with the first?
I just wanted to answer some of the other things that
Yeah.
were brought up.
Okay.
I don't have
So,
to. You
yeah,
can
so,
move on. But you go to Ballotopedia and you can read about a lot of these issues.
okay. All right, a new question or comment? Yes.
On issue 1, are you aware if anybody has actually run any modeling on this?
Oh, modeling?
Pardon?
The question is whether I am aware of anyone having run any modeling. I am virtually certain that both the Democratic and Republican Party have done it. Do I have access to it? No.
Yes, sir.
Quickly, to answer your question, Ballotopedia only gives you the people who they disclosed in their PAC financial statement that had given money before June. of this year, and they will not release another statement of this till after the election. This has nothing to do with who actually owns these things, whether it's joint ownership between them, the collusion, the interlocking directorships, and all that stuff. We'll never know because they have this hidden in these corporations. We don't know who really owns these things. We never will find out.
Yeah, I was just saying, these are the public investors that we know about so
These
far.
are window dressing to the real owners.
Thank you, Ann, very much.